starting this journey, maybe 400 people in the world really knew what was going, and of which 398 of them still sat in very well-paid jobs within American businesses.
Yeah. Tell that my bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Like, he always tells me I'm spending way too much on marketing and other stuff.
Spend zero time on your decks. And you can imagine the conversation with my parents when I said, I'm leaving AWS, going to go off traveling, and I'm going to set up a new business.
So for me, even it was very FOMO creating.
We've got $1 trillion cloud market out there. I think the global cloud market is wasting $400 to $500 billion a year.
So this session was gold. So I'm super excited that you are here today. I'm talking to James Marks, founder and CEO of Canopy, the cloud brokerage helping businesses slash their cloud bills by 20 to 40%. And my first question, James, is that actually true? Like, is it possible that you can slash the cloud bills by up to 20 to 40%?
Yeah, and we've got example case studies to prove it. I think when you understand, and it's important to note initially that it's not all about cutting costs, although that is a byproduct of what we do. It's mainly about increasing value and figuring out, okay, how do we look at your infrastructure as a strategic asset in terms of budget? And obviously with lots of investment into technology, if you optimize this space, how can you reinvest that in other technology that can help you grow and scale using various different forms of technology? But in terms of underlying costs, and I just came off a call earlier this morning where we were analyzing a customer. As a conservative number, we went back to the customer with 30%.
Oh wow.
And so
that's amazing.
What you'll find is there's different layers to that, both commercial, architectural, and obviously cost optimization in terms of governance and how to sort of manage that. And there's various different levers, and large institutions have like massive teams that help sort of manage this. And that's, FinOps as an industry has emerged as a result of a lot of the inefficiency that takes place, particularly say in mid-market and larger scale enterprise clients.
That's super interesting. And before we jump into the details, maybe just some further context. So James and I, we met in Helsinki at the Slush event, and we are both part of Opus, so a global founder community. So that's how we met, and we had like a dinner there in Helsinki. And I remember still how your seat was directly next to me and you pitched me your business. And one thing that I liked so much about our engagement then after this event is that I somehow landed also in your email update chain where you send like updates to potential investors or like interesting stakeholders. And this is, by the way, something that impressed me a lot, and I definitely want to speak about that a little bit later.
On the call from the Opus office in London Bridge at the moment.
Nice.
So
amazing. Cool. So let's maybe jump in with some icebreaker questions. And I'm always super curious to understand, like, how does your typical workday look like? I know sometimes it's difficult to describe it. Probably you are doing a lot as a founder. But yeah, like, how would you describe your typical workday?
So the alarm clock, and more often than not, I actually wake myself up before my alarm clock. But alarm clock goes off at 6 a.m. I then have 2 to 3 hours and actually that's when I actually do a lot of my good focused work, particularly when you're balancing lots of different things. Then calls typically kick off depending on obviously which time zone we're working with. So we've got some clients in the Middle East, some as far as Tokyo, and so it can be that from 8 a.m. onwards, pretty much if you take, for example, today, I think I had a 15-minute break up until 6 o'clock. So that tends to be the bulk of my day, sat on calls, talking with partners. Obviously, a lot of what we do working with clients is meeting people, getting in front of people, building trust, building relationships, both on the supply side and obviously on the customer base. And so it does require a lot of communication. I then have probably a half an hour gap before typically going to some form of event or dinner or something in the evening, which again could be with a client, could be with a partner. You've been to London, there's lots of events going on. And then I tend to try and give myself at least one afternoon, and that's typically a sort of, obviously not the case in this this week, but it was because I was at London Tech event, a tech week, an afternoon a week to decompress, find out what's happened, lots of things changing and we're always iterating and new things come up. So I kind of need that time to try and
So important.
recalibrate.
Yeah, this is so important. I just wanted to say the same. Like, I actually wake up at the same time. The only difference is that I wake up at 7 a.m., but it's basically the same time as you because of the time zone difference.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense. I just feel sometimes that these calls, like, they also take a lot of energy. So I think it's probably the same for you. So it's good probably to sometimes step back and strategize and try to get some thoughts about the business. So I feel this is also very important. I already did like a very, very short introduction about you and your company, but I would like to go a little bit deeper here. So how do you usually explain your business to someone who comes outside of tech with like not a lot of knowledge?
The easiest example is we are cloud and IT infrastructure broker, and we act as a growth partner for a lot of companies to think about cloud strategy and how does that look. Market is shifting significantly. New players are constantly entering the market. There's, different stages of which, customers get access to different funding and other sort of incentives. And we are effectively an aggregator of all that really good knowledge, and we can then pass it on to the customer to help them.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, that's easy to understand then. Okay, perfect. And now if we would look at your company, can you maybe give us some quick facts about your company, where you currently are? Because I saw these investor updates. Maybe you can just let us know like about your current situation, also about your funding round, if it's done already. And then I have a lot of very specific questions.
Yeah. So we're still a baby. We've technically been going a year. I think I landed back in the UK February 20th, 2025. So we're just over a year old. We secured some early investment via our angels on advanced assurance, and we recently pre-closed our funding round. Which is
Nice.
probably one of the hardest things and first-time founder that I've had to go through. And a lot of people help out along the way, and you do need people to take a bit of a hell of a risk on you as an individual, solo founder running the business. And we went through a lot of sort of ups and downs sort of last year, building out a team quite aggressively, then quite quickly scaling back and learning a lot of lessons in that. The goal is really, and this has always been the vision of the company, is that we want to productize everything that we're doing. We want to automate pretty much everything what we're doing. Now, when you're working on multi-million-dollar commercial contracts, and for example's sakes, we've got some of our clients that are doing over 25 million annual cloud spend. So if we're signing a 3-year deal with them, there's a lot of AI that could go and help and support, and you do use a lot of those tools internally, but there's still the need for a person behind the desk, senior executives, CTOs, CFOs of these organizations in order to get these deals across the line. But the idea is that a large chunk of the investment that's come in is building out our product and our platforms, and that is geared towards how do we create this sort of self-serving mechanism where someone has an expert negotiator, broker, industry expert for cloud infrastructure in their pocket, right? And how do they then use that and use, aggregating all the information from across the market, different vendors, to make the right decisions? Because often I think a lot of the inefficiency that we've called out, which ultimately leads to cost savings, is because of alignment of information. Think of Canopy as an extension of your sort of IT, procurement and finance organizations, where we're bringing those people, which at the best of times don't like talking to each other, but we bring them together, present solutions that can ultimately be actioned. And you've got two companies building the same AI product, but one's doing it at half the price. Think of how much further they can get along that roadmap and develop and innovate ahead of you. So it does become a real competitive advantage.
I actually see that very often because, as you know, we prepare companies for investor readiness. We often work on the financial models, and the biggest cost is actually the cloud spending. We should also speak about the partnership. Maybe we can do some intros to founders who just waste money, who have like high cloud spendings, because I actually really like your industry. I think you are really, like, the timing is absolutely on your side. So like it could be probably not a better timing to work on this type of business.
And don't get me wrong, I spent 7 years at Amazon and AWS and left, in a very sort of senior position within that organization. And And I could see this from a helicopter view of what was happening in the market. My two best friends and younger sister are insurance brokers, so I was starting to join sort of two and two together. And similar to how early 1900s, about 10% of mortgages were signed with a mortgage broker. Why? Because everyone went directly to the bank, right? And they knew the bank manager, they're familiar with the bank manager. Now, fast forward to today, over 95% of mortgages are signed with a mortgage broker. And why? Because there's 30 different providers, 30 different products, so you trust your broker to get you the best deal. And there is a point in time where maybe the deals get so big that you end up going direct because that's the best route. But particularly as I compare that to what's happening, the scary thing is that for most organizations, the ones that are going to be successful, there's this fundamental shift where IT costs were always this sort of back closet. Oh, okay, that just runs our systems. Okay, let's kind of leave it there. And slowly, as you mentioned, all of these AI natives, most companies raising 10, 20 million to develop, especially if they're building, training their own AI models, almost half of that, if not more, will be spent on cloud infrastructure. And so when you understand what amount of money and investment is going into it, but with particularly on the CFO side, knowledge of how it actually works and the levers to pull. And again, we always try and say we're an extension of their team, because you're right, we want technology teams doing what they're doing best, and that's building products, not negotiating and talking to sales teams from various different cloud providers, and you've got to play to your strengths. And so we bridge that sort of gap in between.
I think, as I said, the timing is on your side. I just thought about the stupid idea that we should also open up cloud locations, maybe here in Europe, and then also we can cover the full value chain, that you not only provide the best deals, but on top of that, we also even have that exact offering. But let's focus for now maybe on the history of your business, because you mentioned AWS. You already mentioned your position there, and I actually have now a follow-on question on that. So what was the exact moment when you decided that you want to leave the company and basically start Canopy?
I wrote a note to myself at the age of 20 that by the time I'm 30, I want to, have a house, have a girlfriend.
10 million.
Well, I didn't actually put the money. It was more but I wanted to have my own business. And so, and I made a decision quite early on whether or not to go down the banking, finance route or actually lean into tech. And that's where I joined Amazon as a graduate. And so I was like, what's this cool tech company? And back then it wasn't as big as it was now, obviously, but was effectively the world's biggest startup. And so there is no better place to learn entrepreneurship and be given a lot of autonomy. And I, rose through the ranks very quickly. I was the youngest senior manager in, I think, .com history. I need to validate that. But, at the age of sort of 26, I had a team across Europe, and I was part of the customer optimization acceleration team. I then got an opportunity to move into global productivity team. And so that's what really got me visibility into the scale. At that point, AWS was a 90 odd billion dollar run rate business. And so had a lot of exposure into all of the deals that were being signed globally. And I've always been thinking about, okay, what's the idea? And, have a load of notes on your phone about what about this idea? Or what about that idea? And
I love that. I do the same.
Stress testing a few things. And it was one of these moments where, with a few smart people down a pub from AWS, oh, guys, what do you think of this? And that was purely idea at that point. It could be nothing. And I've always been a bit of a risk taker. I had 7 jobs in 7 years at Amazon and always on to the next thing. And I learn things very quickly and I get bored very quickly. And so this is a, if not now, when moment, or a time in my career where the worst that can happen is I sort of move back into a role. And you can imagine the conversation with my parents when I said, I'm leaving AWS. Going to go off traveling and I'm going to set up a new business. And so that was what I told my parents. And
they said, no, James, no, what are you doing?
My dad was in the military and my mum's always believed in me. And what they said, if that's what you're going to do, then, and I've always been one to, whatever I put my mind to, I'm going to give it 110%, right? There's no half in, half out. And I'm a strong believer in that, by the way. If you want to do something, you have to chuck yourself in it, no matter how uncomfortable that is. is, I knew that there was probably going to be another 10 people around the world with that idea. And it was how quickly can I get to a position where we can build something in this space that is, a bit of a first mover in the grand scheme of things. There's not too many cloud and IT infrastructure brokers out there. They existed a while ago, but don't really exist now unless you go to a sort of big four, top four consultancy.
Oh, that's so interesting. I actually see a lot in your story that is quite similar to my own story. So I also remember when I still worked at Deloitte, and then I told my parents, no, I want to do my own business now, because I also thought, if not now, when then? So it was definitely the right decision. But yeah, like, how old are you now, James, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 30 years of age.
So how does your checklist look like right now?
It looks good. I mean, we're still surviving. Obviously, there were some touch and go moments, but funny enough, and I'm a big believer in manifestation, in writing it down. Because when you write it down, and it's funny that there's lots of studies done by people at Stanford and other, credible universities where, write it down, you put it out there, and it doesn't matter how big or small, but actually a lot of it comes down to mindset.
This is super helpful. I think like many people will hear that how you present yourself to other people, and if you do it like in a very positive way, you will also find supporters.
Give you an example. So I presented my initial business case, and maybe it's a British tendency to underpromise, overdeliver, and got in touch with somebody, big thinker. He simply replied, you should be at least 100 or 1,000 Xing this business case in terms of its potential.
Wow.
The moment he says that, you look at it and say, well, actually he's right. What needs to change in the way that you do things now in order to get to that level of scale? Even the people you bring in need to have that sort of mindset.
The people are so important, and also like regarding the exit, like, I mean, cloud is $1 trillion market. So if there is an opportunity to exit in company with these type of multiples, then I would also assume it's definitely cloud. So from that perspective, I think this person is right. But we often limit ourselves when it comes to thinking, So it's also, for me, like it's always, you think, okay, we can't do this because we have to do all this other stuff, or that's not realistic.
Then it becomes execution. Like you've got these great ideas, but how good can you execute? Things I say to the team is like, okay, they've put a date out there. How could you do that in half the amount of time? People like Elon Musk and as well talk about this, but like it's true. It's like that target should be 50% attainable. Before you know it, they've actually delivered it.
They don't sleep in the office. I don't want them.
But I'm a big believer. I used to get 5 days worth of work done in 4 days. So most Friday afternoons I'd have off.
That makes totally sense. Let's focus for now on capital raising journey. So I would like to understand, when was actually the moment in your business where you thought, okay, now I really need funding?
The moment I left Amazon, basically. You got to look at the business. We deal with high ticket enterprise commercial deals with, you no longer have the AWS brand behind you. You have the Canopy logo and everyone's like, who the hell is Canopy? And so, things don't happen overnight. It's not like you build a SaaS product and you can monetize it in 10 days, as an example, if you're building on Lovable. And so, particularly on these, like, things take time. You need to build up credibility. You need to build up the partnerships. Like, we've signed over 120 partnerships in the last year, as an example of how aggressive we've been in terms of like distribution and putting in all the sort of necessary pieces, and that takes time. And so we needed to bring on some investment in order to, provide enough buffer for those. We really got going at the back end of last year, so sort of expected sort of 6 months, and these are enterprise sales cycles, which 6 months is actually pretty good going. And we actually signed our first blue chip deal, which was in July of last year. So actually 4 months after, 3-4 months after launching, we had done a publicly listed company deal where that company had never used a consultancy outside the big four. So at the moment when that sort of thing's happening, you're like, okay, we haven't got necessarily the whole revenue to show for it, but we're definitely in the right space. People see the value in what we can do, and then it's a case of how do you then build a scaling mechanism? How do you build a business that maybe could interest venture capital? Because again, consultancy companies aren't necessarily the most attractive at the moment. If you're not an agentic AI native SaaS platform, it's you're competing against very different market. The pre-seed round had enough signal from the market. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a plain journey. We hit about 3 ICs. We've got a killer team, we've got a good idea. We think, there's definitely some money in this, but actually, to be honest, a lot of VCs, with all due respect, didn't really understand a whole lot of what we were doing.
This is really weird to me now, because I think your business is so straightforward. Sometimes I also sit in client calls and I think, what are they talking about? But for you, you can just give me one sentence and I fully understand the market.
I think it's because if you went to, this doesn't exist. Cloud brokers and IT infrastructure brokers don't really exist, right? There are SaaS management platforms, but we're in a very, very small niche. And I would say starting this journey, maybe 400 people in the world really knew what was going on. 400 people, and of which 398 of them still sat in very well-paid jobs within American businesses. Now it's why aren't you using a mortgage broker? God, you spend all that time trying to do it yourself. Why not speak to this person, because they can get you a much better rate, and it's a no-brainer. So we're riding that sort of early educational thing, and we are also finding it. When I went to the law firm to kind of create some contracts, they'd never created a contract like this in the history of their law firm. And so, these are the things which we're dealing with. We're creating something that doesn't exist in the market, and effectively that was the biggest challenge. And I would say we've got $1 trillion cloud market out there. And I'd say generously, we're probably at 50% efficiency. Oh. I think the global cloud market is wasting, when we get to that point, $400 to $500 billion a year. I say to the team, it's like Lamborghini. We start selling tractors and we finish off selling sports cars.
Do you think that more investors currently enter the market and change their investment thesis and then also include cloud there? Did you notice something like that, especially in the US?
Other smaller neo clouds obviously have emerged, and there's some big investments into those sort of companies, and there's these sovereign AI cloud platforms emerging. So people wanting to be cloud providers, very much taking the Uber model, right? So effectively a marketplace, service-based business is the easiest one because your costs are only my time to begin with.
Yeah. Tell that my bookkeeper.
Yeah.
He always tells me I'm spending way too much on marketing and other stuff.
But it's true. And so
James, I have a couple of, let's say, questions I would still like to ask you. I'm super curious, have you ever manufactured urgency in a way? So, for example, created a deadline or hinted at other term sheets? How do you think about that in the process of fundraising?
And actually coming back to my strategy, which is why we were talking about it, just on the funding side, the way that I did it was by creating these monthly updates to investors. I just, didn't have the time, because I was building a business, to be jumping on 20 different calls with 20 different people providing updates. So I just created a memo that I would send out. And if like what you mentioned, you're in that community of investors or you know people, I just put them on the mailing list, and I just send a 3 or 4 page memo that each month that kind of said where we're at. Then when the tickets started rolling in, and I would say since I implemented that system, it took about 2 months, probably 6 weeks for then the tickets to start rolling in. I'm going to commit, because they could see they've gone from here, and obviously numbers speak for themselves.
Now I have to ask, so they really came in because they received these updates, and that was the reason, the urgency you created. So they said, okay, James, this is now a real business. I want to be part of that.
Yeah. So we and actually as well, when we looped, when other people then got in touch, we wouldn't even have a meeting. We'd be here's the last 3 investor memos.
Oh, wow.
Go and have a read. Do your work, right? Because you're not going to waste my time unless you're serious about it. So have a read. It's all there in black and white. If now you're serious, let's have a chat. And then what you then do is, depending on how much you're looking to raise, and again, there's no right or wrong answer to this, is every single time a ticket comes in, you update the whole group. And sometimes, and I went from 30% closed on the Monday, and if it was a Thursday, I can't remember, but it was Christmas Eve was the day that I got basically closed the round, because
nice.
I then had a ticket on Monday, ticket on Tuesday, and 2 tickets on the Thursday that closed the round. And so, and I hadn't had any drink for about 4 months prior, so I was sober for that period because obviously it was crunch time, and I had a little celebratory drink that evening. But it was like a very quick once it goes, and I'm a strong believer in like keeping people updated. It's like same as you nurture leads for your sales, right? Keep them warm, keep them updated, show some interesting stuff, people, things happening, partnerships, whatever you think that's quite attractive. And people will see that and they'll say, well, hang on a minute, what were they doing last month? And when they see that jump in terms of, ARR projection, pipeline, deals being signed with said companies, like that's something that I want to invest in.
James, can we actually use one of the mails you sent and put them maybe into the podcast description? So I would, of course, anonymize like the data, but I think it would be super helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. Again, we run a lot of our business through integrating all the systems and So I actually used AI to automate that whole report. So everything that was happening in HubSpot would automatically feed that. And everything that was happening in terms of partnerships would automatically feed that. And so there's a system behind it that's actually quite handy. And then obviously the executive summary and other things I would work through and manually write, but it meant that actually the time it saved me, it'd probably take me an hour to do each month.
That's amazing.
And so it's just to give you perspective, like it's not actually a lot of work once you've just got it set up. The hour that you spend on that saves you probably 10 hours of meeting individual investors. Probably.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think everyone should actually implement it. And as I said in the beginning, like I really like these updates as well. So for me, even it was very FOMO creating. So I will definitely try to join the next round. So let me know about that. But do you look for something specific beyond the money when you speak to investors? Like, is there any personality type you try to avoid, for example? Or
this is my first time raising, so I'm sure there'll be things which I learned from this, and it's hard to tell at this stage, because actually the real crux of investors when they can be painful is actually more on exit and decisions around future fundraising rounds. Pick what investment you're looking for, because that can unlock doors and unlock other incentives, and then only raise obviously if you really have to, right? Think about how you want. I'm a very much American mindset. Let's go big. Let's chuck the kitchen sink at it. Let's get distribution. Let's go, as big and as hard as possible, because I think that's where we win as a business.
I still would like to know from you, is there like anything you would like to know or you wish you would have known before you started fundraising that you learned now during the process?
Spend zero time on your decks. Like, honestly, spend zero time on your decks. Spend 100% of your time trying to win business, trying to win customers, right? When you go to an investor later on and you say, I've got 500K of revenue, you don't need a deck. They're like, I'll invest. And actually, if you look at a lot of the companies that were very successful, their initial decks were like, they put it together in 2 minutes and they were like, right. And it's not sharing a deck as well is also a bit of a power play where, we got a deck, but it's just numbers on a spreadsheet, on a slide at the end of the day. Like, if you really get what we're doing, it's actually far bigger than this. So I could put a number, but we don't actually know. It's that sort of, okay, you're going down that route. There needs to be a vision. This needs to be $1 billion business. Like, you have to have that mindset, and you got to tell them and articulate them how. We're going to win these enterprise clients which spend X amount on this stuff. We can save them X% and through this solution. And all we need to do is X, Y, Z in order to do that, right?
James, I hear also like from our discussion, you have this very big vision with Canopy. So does it mean that you plan to raise another like institutional round very soon?
We will be raising capital. If stars align, we'll be raising capital very, very soon. Think about that next round, and then you've got to think about, okay, how much? What does that look like? What does the dilution look like? And timing is everything with all of it. Yeah, we will be raising venture funding. It's just a case of figuring out how much and when.
Nice. All right. So maybe we have like a VC or a family office listening to this episode. So if you're interested to meet James, we will also put your contact details into the description. James, thank you so much for this episode. It was really a pleasure. And I already have in my mind now that you are planning to raise to the next round. So once it's done, let's meet again. And I would love to hear then your next learnings, because this session was gold, like very, very interesting. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be on. And I'm in a first founder, first business, learning and so there's no right or wrong, as I mentioned, but yeah, happy to share. And obviously, welcome the opportunity to be back on again. And hopefully we've got some more exciting news to share on that.